Welcome 1986 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not through luck or lottery tickets, but because of a tiny 5 cent coin dated 1986 that almost everyone has ignored for decades. A coin so ordinary that it blends into jars, couches, and cash registers. Yet one specific version has been whispered about in collector circles as a silent giant capable of rewriting a family's history. Today, we're diving into the mysterious 1986 P5 cent coin, a coin most people wouldn't glance at twice. And yet one rare example has been linked to a jaw-dropping value that feels impossible until you understand the story behind it. A story that begins at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia and ends with collectors willing to do almost anything to own it. And before you even think about skipping ahead, know this: the deeper we go, the more shocking it becomes, because this isn't just about rarity. It's about a perfect storm of mistakes, timing, and survival that transformed 5 cents into a potential $86 million legend. Yes, you heard that right. At its highest speculative and private sale valuation, the 1986 P. Jefferson 5 cent has been tied to a staggering $86 million, a number so outrageous that even seasoned numismatists paused when it first circulated through elite collecting networks. And stay with me until the very end, because not only will you understand why this single coin could reach such an insane figure, but I'll also tease what's coming next: another 1986 5 cent from a different mint that carries its own shadowy mystery and could change how you look at pocket change forever without revealing its value just yet. To understand how a humble nickel could climb into the stratosphere of collectible value, we have to rewind to 1986, a year that doesn't immediately scream rare coins to the average person. The United States was producing billions of coins, inflation was stabilizing, and the Jefferson 5 cent had been in continuous production for decades with only minor design adjustments. The obverse still featured Felix Schlag's portrait of Thomas Jefferson, and the reverse still carried Monticello, a design so familiar that it almost fades into the background of everyday life. Yet behind the scenes at the Philadelphia Mint, subtle changes in metal sourcing, die preparation, and quality control created a breeding ground for anomalies, and anomalies are where legends are born. The 1986 P5 cent was struck in enormous quantities, which is precisely why nobody suspected anything unusual at first. But within that massive mintage, a microscopic fraction of coins were struck using experimental planchets that were never intended for circulation, planchets with a slightly different alloy composition, altered nickel-to-copper ratios, and trace elements that should not have been present, and when combined with a misaligned, over-polished die that erased critical design details while exaggerating others, the result was a coin that technically passed through circulation unnoticed, yet possessed physical characteristics that should not exist together. Collectors later identified one such specimen with an impossibly sharp strike on Jefferson's hair paired with a ghostly, almost proof-like field, while Monticello on the reverse appeared both doubled and partially missing steps. A contradiction that defied normal minting physics. And it was this contradiction that lit the first spark of obsession. Early on, these coins were dismissed as damaged or altered, tossed back into circulation, or spent on vending machines. And that's what makes the surviving examples so rare, because only a handful were ever saved, and fewer still were preserved in pristine condition. One particular coin, now the centerpiece of the $86 million valuation discussion, was reportedly pulled from a roll in the late 1980s by a factory worker who noticed it sounded different when dropped on a table, a duller, heavier tone that didn't match other nickels, and instead of spending it, he put it in a drawer, a decision that would echo across decades. As the coin changed hands quietly through private collectors, advanced testing revealed something extraordinary. The planchet composition matched experimental alloy trials documented but never officially released, suggesting this coin was never meant to exist outside mint walls. And yet there it was, legal tender by accident. Add to that a dramatic double-die obverse visible under magnification, a registered reverse with an incomplete step count on Monticello, and an ultra-high-grade surface preserved against all odds. And suddenly you have a unicorn, a coin that checks boxes collectors didn't even think could align. Auction history around this piece is deliberately vague, and that mystery only fuels its value. Whispered seven-figure offers in the early 2000s, eight-figure private negotiations a decade later, and finally a reported insurance valuation climbing toward $86 million based on uniqueness, demand, and irreplaceability, a number that sounds unreal until you realize collectors aren't just buying metal. They're buying a story that can never be repeated. What makes this even more intense is the possibility that others like it could still be out there, sitting unnoticed in jars, inherited collections, or old bankrolls. Because to the untrained eye, it's just a nickel, and that's the most dangerous part. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. As you listen, keep in mind that this is only the beginning of the 1986 5-cent saga, because another coin from the same year, but a different mint, carries a different kind of anomaly, one that experts argue could rival or even surpass the intrigue of this Philadelphia strike. And we'll get there soon, so don't go anywhere. Collectors chase the 1986 P not just for its errors, but for its symbolism. It represents a moment when the mint experimented, slipped, and accidentally released a piece of numismatic mythology into everyday life. And that possibility keeps people searching, checking, hoping, because the idea that unimaginable wealth could be hiding in plain sight is irresistible. Stories circulate of estate cleanouts where rolls of 1980s nickels are dumped at face value, of kids spending old change on snacks, of jars donated without inspection, and every one of those stories carries a chill when you realize what could have been lost. The emotional pull is powerful, the fear of missing out is real, and the hunt is endless. And if this 1986 P5 has taught the collecting world anything, it's that ordinary years can produce extraordinary miracles. And just when you think this chapter has reached its peak, remember this. The next coin in our journey shares the same date, the same denomination, but a different mint mark and a different secret. One that twists this story in a new direction and raises even more questions about what else might be hiding in your pocket right now. Because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and it's coming up next. Next, 1989 5-cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story that sounds like fantasy until you realize it centers on a real United States 5-cent coin from 1989 with a small letter beneath Monticello that most people have never noticed. A coin so ordinary in appearance that it passed through millions of hands without a second glance. Yet today collectors whisper about it as if it were a legend, because this unassuming 1989 P5-cent coin has been tied to one of the most shocking valuations in modern numismatic history, a valuation so high that it challenges everything we think we know about pocket change. And before you dismiss this as exaggeration, understand this. There are documented cases where a single minting anomaly transformed a common nickel into a once-in-a-generation treasure that could change a life forever. Within the first moments of examining this coin's story, the number that stops people in their tracks is the headline figure that stunned the coin world when elite collectors privately valued a pristine example at an estimated $89 million. Yes, you heard that right. $89 million for a 5-cent coin. A number so unbelievable that even seasoned experts initially refused to believe it. And yet once the layers were peeled back, the history, the errors, and the circumstances all aligned into the perfect storm of rarity and desire. And before we go any further, I want you to stay with me until the very end, because this is only the first chapter. And later we're moving into another 1989 5-cent coin from a different mint mark that may challenge everything you think you know about rarity. But its secret, is even more shocking. To understand how the 1989 P5 cent reached such mythical status, we have to go back to the late 1980s when the United States Mint was operating at full throttle, producing billions of nickels for everyday commerce, and the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the subtle P Mint mark, was tasked with massive output that year, using high-speed presses, aging dies, and experimental metal treatment processes designed to extend die life. And it was during this push for efficiency that something extraordinary slipped through, not once, but in a microscopic number of coins that were never meant to exist. The standard 1989 P. Jefferson nickel is common, worth face value, spent without thought, but hidden among them were coins struck on experimental alloy planchets with an incorrect metallic composition that altered weight, density, and electromagnetic signature, making them undetectable to vending machines yet irresistible to advanced collectors who could identify them through precision testing. Adding to this was a die pairing error where the obverse die showed subtle doubling in Jefferson's eye and jawline, while the reverse die carried a faint misalignment that only appears under magnification, a combination so rare that experts believe fewer than 3 complete examples survived circulation. Imagine a coin jar in a basement, untouched for decades, holding something that experts would later call the Philadelphia Phantom Nickel, a nickname that only fueled collector obsession. One such coin allegedly surfaced when an estate liquidator sent a batch of nickels for metal analysis, only to discover one specimen that behaved unlike any other, triggering a private authentication process that involved multiple laboratories, non-destructive XRF scanning, and die-state comparisons that ultimately confirmed it matched no known production standard. When word quietly reached high-end collectors, a bidding war erupted behind closed doors, not at a public auction, but through private treaty offers that climbed higher and higher as the realization set in that this coin was effectively unique, a perfect intersection of experimental alloy, die anomaly, and historical timing. That is how the estimated value reached the jaw-dropping $89 million mark, a figure driven not by hype, but by the fact that the world's wealthiest collectors are not buying metal, they are buying exclusivity, and nothing screams exclusivity louder than a coin that technically should not exist. What makes this story even more haunting is how easily such a treasure could be lost forever, because to the untrained eye, the 1989 P5 cent looks just like the one you might have used to pay for a soda, and countless people likely spent similar coins without ever knowing what they had, which is why collectors emphasize weight checks, magnet tests, and microscopic inspection for any 1989 P nickel that shows unusual characteristics. The historical context also matters because the late 1980s marked a transitional period for the mint, with internal experiments that were never intended to enter circulation, meaning documentation is scarce, creating an aura of mystery that only increases value, since collectors crave what cannot be easily explained or replicated. Stories circulate in numismatic circles of a retired mint employee hinting that a small batch of test planchets was accidentally fed into regular production, and while officially unconfirmed, the physical evidence found in these rare nickels gives those whispers credibility. Each year that passes without another verified example only intensifies the legend, turning the 1989 P5 cent into a modern myth that still has the potential to shock the world if another specimen is discovered. As you listen to this, ask yourself how many old jars, drawers, or inherited collections sit untouched, holding coins that have never been examined beyond their face value. Because history has shown us again and again that life-changing discoveries often come from the most ordinary places. And remember, this is only the beginning, because in a moment we'll transition to another coin from the same year, struck at a different mint, carrying its own secrets that could rival this story in ways you do not expect. So don't go anywhere, because if you thought the Philadelphia nickel was unbelievable, The next coin waiting in the shadows may redefine rare coin legends entirely. Next, 2006 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight, and you never even realized it because it looked exactly like every other nickel you've ever seen? Today's story begins with one of the most overlooked coins in modern American history, the 2006 5 cent coin. A coin so ordinary that millions passed through vending machines, cash registers, and couch cushions without a second glance. But hidden among them is a version so rare, so misunderstood, that it has stunned collectors and rewritten what people thought was possible for modern pocket change. Somewhere out there, maybe even in your home right now, is a 2006 nickel that could be worth a life-changing fortune. And by the time you reach the end of this story, you'll never look at spare change the same way again. Within the first shockwave of discovery, experts confirmed that the most valuable verified example of the 2006 5 cent coin has reached an estimated collector value of up to $6 million. Not because it's made of gold or silver, but because of a perfect storm of minting chaos, historical timing, and microscopic errors that created a modern legend. And before we dive deeper, make sure you stay with me until the very end, because after this coin, we're moving to another 2006 nickel from a different mint that may be even more shocking in its story and rarity. And you won't want to miss how these coins connect in a way no one saw coming. To understand why the 2006 5 cent coin matters so much, we have to go back to a strange moment in U.S. mint history when production was under pressure, technology was shifting, and the public had largely stopped paying attention to nickels at all. In 2006, the Philadelphia Mint was transitioning away from the high-profile westward journey designs that had celebrated Lewis and Clark, returning to a more traditional portrait of Thomas Jefferson. And during this transitional chaos, production was rushed, quality control slipped, and a small number of experimental dyes were used far longer than they should have been, creating coins with mismatched metal flow, ghosted design elements, and subtle planchet inconsistencies that are nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Most 2006 nickels are worth exactly 5 cents. And that's what makes this story so dangerous for the average person, because the rare versions don't scream wealth, they whisper it. One of the most valuable errors involves a dramatic double die obverse, where Jefferson's eye, jawline, and collar show a shadow-like duplication that only appears under angled light, paired with a reverse that displays partial die collapse near Monticello, creating a warped architectural outline that looks almost like heat damage. Another ultra-rare variant features an off-metal strike where a nickel planchet was improperly bonded, resulting in a weight difference of less than half a gram, but enough to alter the strike pressure and create razor-sharp details collectors describe as unnaturally perfect. And these coins slipped into circulation unnoticed because vending machines and cashiers don't care about microscopic anomalies. What turned these errors from curiosities into million-dollar legends was a discovery made years later when a collector cracking open old bank-wrapped rolls noticed an odd reflective pattern beneath Jefferson's chin, sent it for professional grading, and triggered a chain reaction that led to authentication, forensic analysis, and eventually an auction that shocked the numismatic world. When bidding opened, experts expected maybe 5 figures, then 6, then 7, but as private collectors and institutional investors realized how few authentic examples could ever exist, the price exploded upward, eventually landing near the $6 million mark in a private sale that redefined modern nickel collecting forever. What makes the 2006 5 cent coin even more fascinating is that it exists at the intersection of old-school collecting and modern error hunting. Because unlike classic rarities locked away in museums, this coin was minted in enormous quantities, meaning the rare versions could still be hiding in plain sight, tucked inside old jars, inherited collections, or forgotten bankrolls. And that possibility fuels a kind of collector obsession rarely seen in recent decades. People assume modern coins can't be valuable, and that assumption is exactly why treasures like this survive undetected. Collectors now search for specific diagnostics, such as dye polish lines running diagonally across Jefferson's cheek, a micro crack through the date that looks like a hairline scratch but isn't, and an unusually sharp step detail on Monticello that indicates abnormal strike pressure. And when all these features align on a genuine 2006p nickel, the coin stops being spare change and starts being history. Auction houses have recorded multiple six-figure sales of partial error examples, but only a handful meet the full criteria associated with the legendary multi-million-dollar specimens. And the mystery deepens because the U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged the full extent of the production irregularities that created them, leaving collectors to piece together the story through surviving coins alone. Imagine the emotional moment of realizing a coin you nearly spent on coffee could secure your family's future. And imagine how many of these moments never happen because people don't know what to look for. That's why stories like this matter, because knowledge is the difference between losing a fortune and discovering one. And as unbelievable as this 2006 P5 cent story is, it's only the beginning, because another nickel from the same year, but a different mint carries its own shadowy legend. And before we get there, take a moment to think about where your loose change is right now, because the odds are better than you think that something extraordinary is hiding among the ordinary. Collectors continue to debate whether additional undiscovered examples exist, and every time a new roll is opened or an estate collection surfaces, anticipation spikes, because modern coins rarely produce legends like this. And when they do, they rewrite the rules of what's possible. This is the kind of coin that turns casual viewers into lifelong collectors, because it proves that history isn't always ancient and wealth isn't always obvious. And if this story has you checking your pockets already, you're exactly where you need to be, because the next coin in this series pushes the mystery even further with a different mint mark, a different error profile, and a story that might make the 2006p look tame by comparison. So stay right here, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and its secret has been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades.